The golden light from the chandeliers of the Crestmore Country Club shimmered across the marble floors during the annual Delgado family gala. I smoothed the wrinkles in my navy cocktail dress, fully aware of how understated it looked among a sea of couture gowns, silk ties, and vintage watches. At 38, I was considered the family's lost potential, a polite euphemism for failure. "Isabella, there you are!" My cousin Claudia's voice rang out with the kind of polished confidence that only came with a $300,000 bonus and a corner office. She floated toward me in a fitted emerald dress, a recent promotion to senior executive at Delgado Global Solutions, practically radiating off her. "We were just going over everyone's highlights from the year," she chirped, looping her arm through mine. I forced a smile, resisting the urge to check my phone. An urgent message about tomorrow morning's $1,400,000,000 acquisition was waiting, one that Claudia had signed off on, nervously, several times in the past month. "Hello, Claudia. Congratulations on the promotion," I said with practiced warmth, silently recalling the confidential files sitting in my briefcase, files that had come directly from Claudia's legal team stamped urgent. "Thank you, darling," she said, barely brushing my cheek in a faux embrace. Her perfume was expensive, overly floral and entirely too strong. "Surprised you even heard, considering how independent you've been lately." She said independent like it meant unemployed. She motioned toward a circle of polished relatives nearby. "We've just been chatting about the year's accomplishments. Mateo got tenure at Stanford, Leela just opened her 4th boutique in Soho, and of course, I'm leading the Delgado Tech merger with Easton Industries." Just then, Aunt Marcella, my father's sister and Claudia's mother, appeared beside us, a flute of champagne in hand and judgment in her eyes. "And what about you, Isabella? Still doing that consulting thing?" The way she said consulting made it sound like I was hawking prepaid cell phones in a mall kiosk. "Yes, still consulting," I replied evenly, sipping my sparkling water. I thought of the global meeting set for tomorrow, the final green light moment where I would sit across from Claudia's executive team and approve the terms that would either save or swallow Delgado Tech whole. 10 years, Claudia mused, shaking her head slowly like she was mourning a loss. 10 years since you walked away from that prestigious position at Sterling & Co. And for what? A boutique consultancy nobody's ever heard of? I thought of my private villa in Lake Como, the townhouse in London, and the tech startup I'd quietly bought out last month, none of it under my name. The real power of Vanguard Strategies lay in its anonymity. As founder and CEO, I had grown it into one of the most discreet and influential forces in global corporate strategy, operating behind shell entities and layers of holding companies. "We're doing just fine," I said, letting the edges of a smile slip through. "How's the merger coming, by the way? I heard Easton's board was pushing back on the proposed equity split." Claudia's polished expression faltered for half a beat. "It's under control," she said quickly. "But I wouldn't expect you to understand billion-dollar negotiations." Before I could answer, our cousin Rafael, newly made junior partner at a mid-size law firm, sidled up with a glass of bourbon in hand. "Isabella, still in that tiny office on Lincoln Street. You know we're hiring if you're ever interested in something more stable, admin support perhaps. I could put in a word." I bit back a laugh. Just last week, Rafael's firm had pitched their services to Vanguard, hoping to land a role in the Easton merger. They had no idea the CEO in the video call, blurred background, understated tone, had been me. "That's very kind, Rafael," I said, smiling sweetly. "But I'm quite happy where I am." And I was. Very happy, in fact. Because tomorrow, they'd all find out who really signed the contract that saved their legacy. "Honey," Aunt Marcella interjected, her voice sugar-coated with that fake concern only family can perfect. "You really shouldn't settle for just being comfortable. Look at Claudia. She's about to close the biggest deal in Delgado Global's history. The merger with Easton Industries will make her career." If only they knew. Easton was one of my shell companies, created specifically to pressure Delgado Global into a corner, right where Vanguard Strategies could step in as the savior. Claudia's career-making merger was actually the final move in a plan I'd spent years constructing. A plan designed not just to expand my firm's influence, but to show my family exactly who they'd been overlooking all this time. "Speaking of the merger," Claudia said, checking her rose gold watch, I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with the consulting team. They're just advisors, of course, but corporate likes us to humor them. She gave me a bright, patronizing smile. You should stop by sometime, Isabella. See what a real business looks like. I swirled the last of my water and placed the glass down calmly. Actually, I replied, I've got a meeting of my own tomorrow, a signing ceremony, in fact, rather important contract. Raphael, ever the opportunist, grinned. Finally landed a client for that little consulting firm of yours? I met his gaze and smiled, not smugly, just knowingly. You could say that. Tomorrow's going to change a lot of things. As I slipped out of the ballroom, I heard Claudia's voice behind me, hushed but cutting. Poor Isabella, still playing pretend after all these years. What a waste of potential. In the quiet of my car, I finally checked the email buzzing in my pocket. It was from Matteo, my senior advisor. Everything's ready. Delgado's board is desperate. They'll sign anything. They still don't know we hold every card. I drove through the city to my penthouse, a place my family didn't know existed, and spent the evening reviewing the final terms. The merger contract was long, dense, and beautifully engineered. Buried in it were clauses that would shift strategic control of Delgado Global directly into Vanguard's hands, and ultimately, mine. Claudia thought she was closing a deal. In reality, she was delivering her company, our family's legacy, to the cousin she'd always treated like background noise. In my home office, I opened the secure cabinet and pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Delgado. Inside were years of notes, timelines, comments, even family interactions, all lined up next to pivotal business moves. Every smug remark, every time they called me ambitious in a cute way, every backhanded compliment was part of the data that brought us here. I picked up my phone. Sarah, I said to my assistant, make sure the penthouse conference room is prepped for 9 a.m. Also, let's have the photographer ready. I want every second of tomorrow documented. Yes, Miss Phoenix, she replied without missing a beat. That name, Miss Phoenix, never appeared at family dinners. But tomorrow, it would be engraved on the final page of a billion-dollar contract. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge didn't need to be cruel or loud. Sometimes it just needed a signature line that read, Isabella Phoenix, CEO, Vanguard Strategies. The next morning, I stepped into my private elevator at the heart of Manhattan's most prestigious office tower. My tailored charcoal Armani suit, never worn to family functions, fit like armor. As I rose to the 62nd floor, the city lit up beneath me, unaware it was about to witness a quiet reckoning. The elevator doors opened to floor-to-ceiling glass and a perfectly set boardroom. Good morning, Miss Phoenix, Sarah greeted, placing a folder on the table. Let's begin, I said. And just like that, the game changed, forever. Good morning, Miss Phoenix, Sarah greeted me as I stepped out of the private elevator into Vanguard's executive wing. After 10 years, she was one of the few people who had witnessed both sides of my life. Isabella Delgado, the family failure, and Isabella Phoenix, the woman behind one of the most powerful consulting firms on the planet. The Delgado Global team is in the main conference room, Sarah added, walking alongside me. Your cousin Claudia is vocal about the delay. I glanced at my reflection in the brushed steel walls. Gone was the quietly dressed Isabella from last night's family gala. Today, I wore a tailored suit in deep charcoal, sharp lines, and quiet confidence. Today, I was Isabella Phoenix. How long have they been waiting? I asked, already knowing the answer. 20 minutes, Sarah said with a glint of mischief. Miss Delgado has mentioned her critical executive schedule approximately a dozen times. Well then, I adjusted my jacket, let's not keep them waiting any longer. The main conference room was a glass and marble monument to power. The sweeping views of Midtown Manhattan framed the room like a painting. Claudia stood at the far end, mid-rand, her tone sharp with entitlement. It's completely unacceptable, she snapped. I don't care who this consultant is. This level of unprofessionalism is inexcusable. Raphael sat nearby, looking vaguely uncomfortable, probably unsure why he was there at all. My uncle Alejandro, Claudia's father, and the CEO of Delgado Global, was seated at the center of the table with two board members beside him. Finally, Claudia snapped as the doors opened. "Do you have any idea who I—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her expression shifted in rapid succession: outrage, confusion, disbelief. "Isabella!" Raphael stood so fast he knocked over his water glass. "What are you doing here? This is a private board meeting." I walked to the head of the table with quiet, steady confidence, setting my briefcase down with a crisp click. The silence was sudden and heavy. "Good morning," I said, pressing a button on the panel. The room's screens descended from the ceiling, displaying the Vanguard Strategies insignia. "Apologies for the delay. Let's begin the meeting regarding the Delgado Easton merger." My uncle finally found his voice. "Isabella, this is not appropriate. We're here to meet with A.M. Phoenix. Where is she?" "I am," I said, opening my folder. "Isabella M. Phoenix, founder and CEO of Vanguard Strategies, and as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Easton Industries." Dead silence. Claudia's face drained of all color. Her expensive dress suddenly looked like a child playing grown-up. Raphael rifled through the documents Sarah was now handing out, scanning with rising panic. This has to be a mistake," Claudia stammered. "You're just a small-time consultant. You work out of a closet downtown." I smiled. "That's one of our satellite offices for boutique clients. Vanguard operates in 47 countries. We own this building, and as of today, through Easton's acquisition and the leveraged consolidation of Delgado Global's outstanding debt." I clicked to the next slide. "We hold a controlling interest in your company." My presentation unfolded with precision: a 10-year roadmap, confidential transactions, restructuring models, and shell corporations, all strategically aligned under Vanguard's direction. Every chart was another truth my family had never seen coming. "When I left Sterling & Co., you all thought I was running away," I said, looking directly at my uncle. "But even then, I had contracts with 3 multinational firms. While you mocked my ambition, I built a global empire." Alejandro stared at the charts, stunned. "Easton is your company?" "Through a series of holdings and silent partners, yes," I said calmly. "Just like the venture firm that's been quietly acquiring Delgado's outstanding debt for the past 3 years. I turned to Claudia, whose silence was finally more telling than her usual bravado. "You thought this merger would save you, but the terms? The consulting fees? The leadership shift?" I paused. "They're not up for negotiation." Because this time, I wasn't asking for a seat at the table. I owned it. I pulled out the final contract and placed it carefully on the table. "Vanguard Strategies will assume full operational control of Delgado Global," I said, my voice calm and firm. "We will restructure the management team and implement a new corporate strategy effective immediately." "You can't do this," Raphael blurted out, his usual legal swagger faltering. "The board would never approve." "They already have." I nodded at Sarah, who tapped the tablet in her hand. The screens in the conference room lit up with a list of board members' signatures. "The vote passed last night unanimously," I continued. "Once they reviewed the full terms of the merger, including the details of Delgado's outstanding debt, they understood the consequences of not moving forward. Without this deal, the company would be facing immediate loan recalls and regulatory review." Uncle Alejandro stood slowly, the weight of his unraveling legacy visible in his hunched shoulders. "Why, Isabella?" he asked quietly. "Why go to all this trouble?" I stepped away from the head of the table and walked slowly around it, looking each person in the eye. "Because 10 years ago you all taught me a valuable lesson," I said. "You taught me that in our world, perception matters more than truth, that titles matter more than talent, that a polished name and designer suit earn more respect than quiet hard work." I paused beside Claudia, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. "Last night, cousin, what did you call me?" I asked. "A nobody? After all these years?" She flinched, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, her silence louder than any response. "Here's today's reality," I said, returning to my seat. "Delgado Global is now a subsidiary of Vanguard Strategies." I clicked to the next slide. "Claudia, your position as Executive Vice President is being eliminated effective immediately. Raphael, your firm's legal services will no longer be retained." I turned to Uncle Alejandro. And you, I said with no malice, only resolution, will be announcing your retirement this afternoon. The next hour unfolded in a haze of silence, signatures, and disbelief. Executives filed out one by one, defeated, with folders in hand and questions they couldn't bring themselves to ask. When only Claudia remained, I called out to her one last time. Next family reunion, I said. Remember, success doesn't always wear Chanel. After they left, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sarah walked over, handing me a warm coffee. Was it worth it? She asked softly. All these years of keeping your success hidden? I thought about the dismissive remarks, the endless patronizing offers to help me find a real job. Then I thought about the empire I'd built from scratch, the thousands of employees across continents, and the influence I could now wield for good. It was never about revenge, I said. It was about showing that there's more than one way to win, that you don't have to fit into their mold to matter. Over the next year, Delgado Global transformed under Vanguard's direction. We appointed leadership based on merit, not bloodlines. Claudia eventually found a mid-level operations role at a private firm. Hopefully she gained something her resume never taught her: humility. Raphael's firm struggled after losing both Delgado and Vanguard as clients. And the family dynamics? Those shifted too. The next reunion took place in a quieter venue, a garden, not a ballroom. There were fewer Rolexes, less posturing, and more honesty. Aunt Marcella even asked about my company, not with sarcasm this time, but with genuine interest, though she still winced every time someone mentioned Vanguard strategies. My father, who had silently watched all those years while his daughter was dismissed by his extended family, finally pulled me aside. I'm proud of what you've built, he said, hugging me. Not just the business, but how you handled it all. And he was right. Vanguard had become more than just a consulting firm. It had become a symbol for innovation, for ethical leadership, for transformation. In my office, I keep a small photo. It's from that first meeting, the moment Claudia realized who I was. Not because I delight in her shock, but because it reminds me, true success isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about building something lasting. They mocked the little consulting firm for a decade, called me naive, a dreamer. That firm just acquired its 100th company last week. But that's a story for another family reunion. If my story resonated with you, don't scroll past, talk to me. I wasn't supposed to succeed, not by the standards of my family or the world I was raised in. They told me I was wasting my potential, mocked my little consulting firm, and tried to wrap my worth in job titles and designer labels, but I kept building anyway, quietly, relentlessly, and now, here we are. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told your dreams were too small or too unrealistic, drop a comment, tell me where you're building from, share your story. Let's create a space where ambition is celebrated, not silenced. Your voice matters, even if they can't hear it yet. Trust me, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one changing the world behind the scenes. Here's the advice I wish someone had told me. You don't need loud validation to make your work meaningful. You don't need to be seen to be powerful. Let them underestimate you. Let them talk. And then build anyway. Build something so strong, so smart, so unshakable that by the time they recognize your brilliance, you're already 10 steps ahead. Success doesn't have to look how they expect. It just has to be yours, on your terms.